I'm Terry Fry, author of Playing Piano in a Brothel, and you're watching Colorado Sports Connection.
Welcome back to Colorado Sports Connection. We're talking with Ron Zappolo. Now, Ron, when we left, we're talking about the Broncos here. Now, you've definitely had your time with the coaches. Talk about the time from Red Miller all the way through Mike Shanahan.
All right. Red Miller I love. I still see Red. I still talk to him. Red's 80 years old. I had breakfast with Red, probably, not to drop names, probably 6 months ago. He's doing great. He was a man's man. He came in here in '77. I'll never forget being up there in Fort Collins, and he got down. He was an old offensive line coach. And he got down, showed the line how he wanted it done, cut his head open. He's bleeding, and this is how we do it, and he's swearing and everything else. He was the perfect guy at the perfect time. Red left, Dan Reeves came in, and, a lot of success with Dan. Dan was a totally different kind of guy. But same thing with Dan. I've spoken to Dan in this past decade 3 or 4 times. I've seen Dan. I probably had the most volatile relationship with Dan. Dan was not afraid to tell me I didn't know what I was doing. And, he would do it publicly, and I kind of liked the give and take. Dan would always get mad, but you know what? We'd always shook hands, and it was great. And, Dan had a lot of success. Never got to that ultimate game. And then Wade Phillips came along, who of all the people that have ever coached here, without question, nicest person. Nicest person. Wade, if you don't like Wade Phillips, there's something wrong with you. And I think they got the perfect hire down there in Houston, Gary Kubiak.
Yes.
Hiring Wade Phillips to run his defense. Houston will be a lot better with Wade as the coordinator. And Wade was one of those guys, and you see him in football, he's better as a coordinator than he was as a head coach. And then that begot Mike Shanahan, who came in and as good as there ever was. Came in and within 3 years he won a Super Bowl. He had the right idea. He knew what he was doing. Nobody knows offense better than Mike Shanahan. I was part of that. I've had that stare where Mike would look at you when he got mad a few times. He never aired me out like Reeves. He'd just give me the stare. But he never really got mad at me.
And Shannon Sharp talked about that
stare.
Oh,
he
said he'd rather be fined $50,000 than get the stare.
I asked him a question once before the Super Bowl when they went down to play the Falcons down there. And we were still in Denver. And I asked him a question about Dan Reeves. And I was standing as close to him as probably the cameras are. And he gave me that stare and he answered the question. And later he called me over. He said, "Boy, I'm glad you asked me that question." I said, "You were staring at me like it was my fault." He goes, "No, I hope people knew that I was just talking about Dan Reeves." And there was a lot of dislike. And I think they've, to some degree, buried the hatchet. A lot like Elway and Reeves have. But, Mike Shanahan he's won 2 Super Bowls. He's in a very exclusive club. And, what he did, you can't take it. When these people would say, well, he never won since Elway. Well, you know what? A lot of people don't win. How long has it been since Belichick won? It's been a while, like 6, 7 years. The coaches go through this. I know he struggled in that first year in Washington, but if they hang in there with Mike, he will win, and they'll be happy that they have him.
You brought something up between Dan Reeves and Mike Shanahan. Now, when I look back, I see the 2 men, but they were the same when they came to coaching. They wanted everything themselves, and it had to be done their way.
Yeah.
So it didn't surprise me that they didn't get along.
Me neither. They're much more alike than they probably either one want to realize. Both very organized. Both just see it their way. Both have a hard time working for somebody. They could work for Pat Bowlen, but I don't think they wanted a general manager telling them what to do. But yeah, you make a good point. They were very similar people in that sense. Now, I think they looked at offense differently. Dan's theory was, we got a studded quarterback. Let's keep it close. Don't screw it up. We got a good defense. We'll win. Mike's theory was, let's bludgeon them on offense. Let's when we get them down, get our foot on their throat, stomp the life out of them. They both had different ways of doing it, but they both had their success. I think Mike's had more when it comes to Super Bowls, but Dan Reeves was a very good football coach.
Now here we are talking about the Super Bowls, and you're covering the Broncos, and
not anymore,
but back then. But
we're talking about ancient history now.
Ancient history. You're covering the Broncos. They're going to the Super Bowl against Dan Reeves. Mm-hmm. Does it get any better than that?
It was great.
Story-wise?
It was great. It was great. And I remember going down there that week, had a great time, enjoyed. I'll tell you who else I really enjoyed. I remember walking up to Steve DeBerg, who was the backup quarterback of the Falcons. And he was in a big scrum on media day. So I'm angling in there, right, to try and get a question in. So I finally ask him some innocuous question, and I'm standing over here, and he turns like this, and he looks at me, and he goes, well, I don't know about any of that, but I sure as hell miss drinking at the Colorado Mine Company with you. And I'm thinking, that's Steve DeBerg. He hasn't changed any. And he was really fun. He was one of my all-time favorite athletes to cover in Denver because he was fun.
We're going to take a quick break, and then talking about covering athletes, we're going to talk about other athletes that you covered here in Colorado as well.
Sure.
We'll be right back with more talking with Ron Zappolo right here on Colorado Sports Connection.
Hello, I'm Haven Moses.
This is Steve Foley, former Denver Bronco.
I'm Jim Sacamano of the Denver Broncos.
And you're watching Colorado Sports Connection.